Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into the oddly cozy, mildly fragrant world of medieval monasteries, where the cheese wasn't just food, it was practically a spiritual path, paired with the gentle sound of falling rain. You'll find yourself drifting into cloisters where monks whisper prayers, stir steaming vats of milk, and occasionally thank heaven for a particularly well-aged wheel of cheddar. Picture yourself walking through a damp stone corridor, the smell of hay and fresh cream in the air, lit by flickering candlelight reflecting off wooden beams darkened by centuries of quiet labor. You're wrapped in a scratchy wool cloak someone handed you when you arrived, probably itchy, probably blessed, and as you step inside the cheese cellar, the humidity hugs your skin like a sleepy dog. A soft drizzle taps the roof above. Somewhere behind a wall, a cow grunts with the quiet authority of someone who knows she's essential to the entire operation. You might be thinking, I could totally do this monk thing. But then again, you haven't heard the midnight bell yet, or tasted their terrifying attempt at wine, or survived a full Lent on nothing but fermented curds and boiled root vegetables. You probably won't survive this, but you will sleep very well. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your city and your local time. I love knowing where you're listening from as the rain falls. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge slowly through a monastery garden, the grass still wet from this morning's rain. Cloistered walls stretch up around you, ivy crawling up sun-warmed stone. The smell of rosemary and thyme hangs heavy in the air, and nearby, a sleepy donkey eyes you without judgment. It's the 12th century, somewhere in northern Europe. Monks bustle quietly silent, but expressive in their movements. One nods toward the dairy wing, and you follow. Past low-hanging doorways and wooden beams carved by hands now long gone. Inside, it's humid, very humid. You duck beneath bundles of drying herbs and enter a room with great clay vats, shelves lined with rounds of ripening cheese, and one solitary monk standing with a ladle. He gestures toward a bench. You sit. Here's the thing. Cheese in medieval monasteries wasn't an afterthought. It was a lifestyle. These monks were farmers, brewers, bakers, and cheesemakers extraordinaire. Cheese was a way to preserve milk, to stretch protein across the lean months, and frankly, to keep their hands busy while observing near constant silence. Monasteries across Europe became cheese incubators, not because of some divine dairy vision, but because monks needed sustenance that traveled well, and could be offered as a humble gift to powerful nobles. And also, it was delicious. The sounds in the room are subtle. the occasional drip of whey, a wooden spoon stirring curds, a soft murmur from a passing monk who forgot about the no-talking rule. It's a world of hushed textures. Some of these cloisters, especially in France, became cheese-making powerhouses. You'll have heard of some Munster, Roquefort, even Brie, yes. The gooey one you pretend to understand at parties. Many of these cheeses trace their roots back to monastic hands, stirring morning milk with reverent care. And this wasn't just a hobby. Saint Benedict's rule, that grand old list of spiritual do's and don'ts, actually carved out time for manual labor. The Benedictine motto was ora et labora, pray and work and cheese, gave monks a way to do both. It was repetitive, quiet, and oddly meditative. A typical day in a monastery revolved around the divine office, 8 services spaced throughout the day and night. In between those prayers, work, fields, kitchens, scriptoriums, and yes, cheese rooms. A place where the holy and the holy Swiss obviously met in peaceful fermentation. And lest you think this was some quaint side hustle, know this: some abbeys grew so wealthy from cheese and ale that they practically functioned as small kingdoms. Cheese wasn't just calories, it was currency. Of course, conditions weren't always perfect. Aging cheese meant damp caves, stone cellars, or specially designed rooms that, let's be honest, smelled like a wet sock had a theological crisis. But that didn't stop the monks. They learned to read their cheeses like scriptures. A bulging rind could mean a bacterial rebellion. A weeping wheel might suggest too much salt or not enough patience. You begin to see how obsession is born. In your lap now sits a crust of warm bread and a chunk of pale cheese wrapped in linen. You nibble slowly, the tang of aged milk mingling with the earthy scent of the room. Outside, rain drums softly on the roof tiles. Somewhere, a bell rings faintly for the afternoon prayer, and you sit there, realizing that in this odd, ancient world, cheese was more than food. It was a ritual, a quiet form of art, a creamy, pungent path to divine understanding. And tomorrow's cheese would be even better. You're up early the next morning. Too early. The kind of early that feels like it might still be yesterday. Rain has eased to a mist. Just a fine dampness that clings to your woolen robes and slicks the flagstones under your feet. The air smells of peat smoke and milk. Someone's already lit the fires in the dairy. You follow the faint sound of cowbells into the dim gray light. The dairy sits on the far edge of the monastery grounds, bordered by quiet fields and low stone walls smudged with moss. Inside, it's already bustling in the quiet, monastic way. Of course, the cows are the unsung heroines of this tale. These ladies are sturdy, mostly shaggy, and with that look of eternal patience all medieval livestock seem to share. A young monk leads one in by a rope. She moves slowly, like she knows she'll be honored with a portrait in cheese form someday. Milking is rhythmic, steady. You join the line of monks bent over simple wooden pails. The soft hiss-squirt hiss of milk hitting the bucket, a kind of sleepy percussion. There's a strange peace in the repetition. No one speaks. You wouldn't be able to hear them over the quiet chorus of cowbell chimes and the wet rustle of hay anyway. Monasteries bred their own herds specifically for cheese. Not all milk is created equal, you learn. Some monks debated endlessly quietly, but passionately about the virtues of goat versus cow. Ewe's milk was considered a delicacy in certain orders. Though difficult to come by, one obscure record even describes a rogue group of monks in southern Italy trying to milk wild water buffalo. Historians still argue whether that was devotion or dairy-based madness. The result, however, mozzarella di bufala, go figure. Cheesemaking began almost immediately after milking. There was no refrigeration, and raw milk waits for no prayer. You help lug heavy buckets into the workroom, where the first task is warming it over a low fire. The copper kettle is vast, its sides darkened with use and soot. It smells faintly sweet like warm cream with a whisper of barn to turn milk into cheese. Monks added rennet, often sourced from the dried stomach lining of calves. Not exactly appetizing, but you're too sleepy to protest. As the rennet works, the milk curdles, separating into curds and whey. Yes, like the nursery rhyme. No, there's no tuffet in sight. A monk in his 60s, Brother Aurelian, you're told gives you a tired smile. He's been working with cheese for 40 years, and his hands are deeply lined, as if the cheeses have written something in his palms. He gently presses the curds with a wooden paddle, watching them like a master artist watching paint dry. As the curds solidify, they're scooped into molds, round, square, some with curious patterns carved into the wood. It's almost like a ceremony. The cheese is wrapped in cloth, then pressed under stone weights to expel moisture. There's something both rustic and scientific about it all. You notice an odd little quirk. Some monks whisper blessings as they mold the cheese. Not loudly, just under their breath. A habit born of centuries. Whether it truly made the cheese holier or just tastier is anyone's guess. But you have to admit, that's a level of attention to detail missing from your last store-bought block of cheddar. As you help stack the molds in the cool cellar, you can't help but wonder, how did this all become such a central part of monastic life? It goes far back to the 6th century. Saint Benedict of Nursia, the founding father of Western monasticism, wrote a rule book for monastic living that would be adopted across Europe. It included prayer schedules, behavioral expectations, and importantly, manual labor. Work wasn't just practical, it was spiritual. Making cheese fulfilled everything on that list. It was humble, rhythmic, required patience, and could be done in silence. Plus, it allowed monks to serve their communities by feeding travelers, bartering with villagers, and offering sustenance to the poor. Some abbeys became famous for their dairy. Citeaux Abbey in Burgundy, the home of the Cistercian order, was so dedicated to cheese that their products traveled across regions. Monks there developed a recipe that's considered an ancestor of today's époisse, a cheese so pungent that it was once banned from public transportation in France. Yes, really, but at the heart of all this creamy industry was a quiet devotion. Cheese wasn't just food. It was a byproduct of obedience, discipline, and an almost obsessive attention to natural processes. You had to observe, wait, smell, touch, and maybe that's why the monks kept coming back to it. In a world where spiritual life meant repetition and ritual, what could be more fitting than something that aged over time, changed with the seasons, and rewarded stillness outside? The rain starts up again, harder this time. You step into the cloister walk, listening to the gentle knock of droplets on clay tiles overhead. One of the cows moos, deeply unimpressed by the weather. You smile inside the cellar, behind thick oak doors. Today's cheese will begin its long transformation. Days from now, it will be turned, washed, tended to like a sleeping infant, and weeks, months, or even years from now, someone will cut into it and taste the silence, the patience, and the prayer baked into every bite. You head back to your chamber, footsteps echoing against wet stone. A little bit of cheese clings to your sleeve. You don't mind. Somehow, it feels like you've been part of something very old and very sleepy. The next few days slip by like honey across warm bread slow, sticky with silence, and strangely comforting. You settle into a rhythm of sorts. Wake, pray, milk, stir, age, repeat. It's almost meditative. You begin to understand why these monks seem so at peace. Either that, or they're all just really good at hiding their exhaustion. This morning, the fog sits low across the fields, and the cowbells sound more distant than usual. You shuffle toward the dairy, wool robe trailing a little damp along the stone floor. A faint, briny scent tickles your nose. It's coming from a new batch of cheese, ripening in the cellar. As you descend the steps to check on it, your bare feet meet the cool of old stone. The air thickens. Cheese cellars are sensory time machines, moist, musty, and humming with quiet purpose. You pull back a linen cloth to peek at a young wheel, only to find it weeping gently, as if moved by divine emotion. Monks would have told you the cheese was alive, and honestly, they weren't wrong. Back in the main workroom, a small argument brews well. As much of an argument as you can have when you're not allowed to talk. Two monks are gesturing emphatically over a small bowl of separated curds. One points, the other shrugs. You realize after a beat that they're debating salt levels. Apparently, one of them oversalted yesterday's batch, and the other is worried it'll offend Brother Ambrose's fragile palate. Salting is a crucial part of the process. Too little, and the cheese sours too much, and it dries out faster than a novice monk at 3 a.m. prayers. Most monasteries had their own salt rituals. Some mixed brines flavored with herbs. Others rubbed the salt directly into the rind with rhythmic care. A sort of dairy massage. Interestingly, there were rumors that certain monasteries used holy water to make their brine. Historians still argue whether that was superstition, smart sanitation, or just a really clever marketing ploy. You're given a task to by stirring the curds. It doesn't sound exciting, and it's not, but it requires complete presence. Your arms move in a slow, circular rhythm, paddle gliding through the thickening milk around you. Other monks do the same. No one speaking, no one hurrying. Just the swirl of wood against milk and the steady exhale of breath. It's then you realize how deeply the cheesemaking process reflects monastic life. It's slow, it's quiet, it's repetitive. And just when you think nothing's happening, everything starts to change. Once the curds are ready, you help load them into molds again. Today's shapes are different, longer, narrower. They'll become a firmer cheese, one better suited for storage through the winter. Oh, cheese wasn't just food, it was calendar. Monks knew which cheeses to make based on the time of year. A soft cheese for early spring, before the meadows bloomed. A firmer, nutty cheese for autumn, when it needed to last through the cold. Some monasteries even used their cheese rotation to track the liturgical calendar. You imagine someone flipping open a fat vellum tome, not to find scripture, but to check which cheese to make in mid-Lent. That's organization on a divine level. As you set down the final mold and wipe your hands on your robe, which is now more of a walking cheesecloth, you're summoned to the garden. It's herb day. No, not that kind. Think basil, thyme, rosemary herbs the monks cultivated both for healing and flavoring their beloved cheese. You learn that herbs weren't just for the infirmary. Monks experimented constantly, infusing their cheese with fennel, sage, and sometimes strange things like crushed chestnuts or fermented apple peel. One recipe from a Bavarian abbey even lists the root of that which makes one dream. No one's quite sure what that was, but it sounds like a medieval melatonin. You crush herbs between your fingers. The scent is sharp, earthy, and oddly nostalgic. Even though you've never been here before, a bee drones past. Somewhere behind you, Brother Aurelian hums the faintest note of a Gregorian chant before remembering he's not supposed to. Lunch is simple brown bread, lentils, and of course, cheese. This batch is creamy, with a tang of wild thyme. The monks don't compliment it aloud, but you can tell by the way they cut slightly bigger slices. High praise in a world without adjectives. After the meal, you're tasked with helping in the drying room. Some cheeses are rubbed, turned daily, even sung to quietly, and only by the brave. Others are simply left alone, resting in patient rows like monks in evening prayer. One wheel has cracked, a pity, but no one panics. The monk in charge simply marks it with a charcoal X and places it in the for cooking pile. Even flawed cheese has purpose. A small life lesson, wrapped in whey. As the day ends, you stand at the edge of the cloister walk, watching the sunset dissolve into low clouds. Your hands smell of brine and thyme. Your robe is stained, and your back aches slightly from stirring curds too enthusiastically. And yet, you feel something strange, a sort of satisfaction, like you've participated in something ancient and quiet and deeply edible. You lean on the stone railing, watching the first stars peek through the clouds. Somewhere below, the cows settle in for the night, their breath misting in the cool air. The cheese rests in silence. So do the monks. You wake to the faint clatter of wooden sandals on stone and the echoing cough of a rooster who seems to regret everything about dawn. The rain's back, but softer now, a gentle patter that brushes against the monastery's slate roof, like fingertips on a drum. Outside your cell, the stone hallway glistens faintly with moisture. Your robe is still damp from yesterday's work, and it carries the comforting scent of hay, milk, just a whisper of time. You stretch, wince slightly from all the stirring, and shuffle toward the cloister like someone who hasn't quite remembered what century this is. Today is washing day. No, not your robe, though it needs it. Today, you're helping wash the cheese. Yes, wash. If this surprises you, you're not alone. The first time you hear Brother Pascal explain it, you nod politely, assuming it's some sort of medieval metaphor. It's not. Some cheese varieties, especially the smelly, glorious ones, get bathed regularly during the aging process. The monks use brine, beer, wine, or even fermented herb mixtures to keep the rind from drying out and to encourage the right bacteria to grow. You realize, after a few moments, that you're gently massaging bacteria into cheese. There's something oddly intimate about it, the way the rind gives slightly under your fingers, the little nicks and dimples forming patterns that seem both accidental and purposeful. Each cheese has its own personality. One wheel is cracked and lumpy, the next perfectly smooth and smug. Brother Pascal insists that how you wash the cheese affects its flavor. He demonstrates a circular motion, slow, firm, and oddly soothing. You try to copy it, but yours looks more like you're tickling the wheel. The monk says nothing, but he definitely judges you with his eyebrows. The wheel you're washing is part of a special batch meant for a bishop's visit next month. It's been aging for nearly a year, and the smell is assertive, like mushrooms, old leather, and someone's forgotten socks. But underneath, there's a rich, creamy scent that hints at something transcendent. You're not sure if you want to eat it, or write poetry about it. After washing comes turning. Every wheel must be flipped gently, carefully, but firmly. This keeps moisture levels even and prevents the cheese from collapsing in on itself like a theological crisis. You lift a heavy wheel with both hands, muscles straining, and gently rotate it. One monk beside you hums tunelessly through his nose, the universal sound of effort. There's a curious peace in this routine. No shouting, no rush, just slow, intentional movements. The kind of work that grounds you. Maybe it's the rain. Maybe it's the cheese. Maybe it's just the fact that no one's asked you to check your email since you got here. Later that morning, Brother Tomas tells you about a time the entire cellar had to be blessed because someone left the door open during a thunderstorm and let in unclean air. You raise an eyebrow. Unclean air. He nods solemnly, then shrugs. Historians still argue whether this incident actually changed the cheese or just made the monks feel better about it. As the rain picks up again outside, you huddle near the fire with a few other novices, hands still damp from brine. One monk shares a tiny tale, barely above a whisper, about a brother who once tried to make cheese out of almond milk during a particularly strict Lent. The result was apparently so bad, it was buried behind the chapel, and no one ever spoke of it again. This leads to a surprisingly animated round of hand gestures about failed cheese experiments. One involved rose petals, another, crushed fish bones. No one knows why. Monks, it seems, got bored sometimes, and cheese was a forgiving outlet for creativity. Lunch is quiet today, just root stew and a slab of pungent cheese that leaves your lips tingling. You sit near the garden window, watching raindrops race down the glass. Someone hums a line from a psalm, and you find yourself nodding off mid-chew. You wake up when Brother Aurelian nudges your shoulder with a bread crust. The cheese waits for no one. He murmurs with a smile before disappearing into the hallway like a soft ghost. The afternoon brings an entirely new task: labeling. This may sound unimportant, but in the age before sticky tags and Sharpies, labeling cheese was practically a liturgical art. The monks used charcoal, sometimes ink, sometimes burned marks made with carved wooden stamps. Each wheel receives a symbol indicating its date, milk source, destination, and what we'd now call its flavor profile. Except theirs reads more like suitable for feast days, may induce contemplative silence, best before next harvest. You're handed a small wooden stamp in the shape of a lily, apparently the symbol for soft, mild cheese made in the spring. You press it into the rind gently, leaving a faint imprint on the bloomy white surface. It's oddly satisfying, like branding something that's been patiently waiting to become real. Some cheese wheels are marked with crosses, others with animals, saints, or even astrological symbols. One mold bears the unmistakable outline of a fish, used for Lent-friendly cheese with no animal rennet. That one is reserved for the truly devout or the truly desperate. You spend the rest of the day cataloging wheels. Shelves stretch high in the stone room, and you climb wooden ladders that creak beneath your weight. Careful not to drop anything. One fall, and you'd be flattened by something that smells like punishment and redemption at the same time. By the time you descend the last rung, your hands are covered in soot, salt, and a sticky golden smear of honeyed rind. You don't even care. You feel calm, centered, a little hungry. As evening falls, you return to the dormitory, passing the chapel where a few monks already kneel in quiet prayer. Their voices rise like smoke, gentle, melodic, soothing. You sit at the edge, letting their chant wash over you like warm broth. And somewhere in the distance, behind thick walls and cedar doors, the cheese continues its transformation. Silent, steady, smelly, sacred. The rain is softer tonight, almost a whisper, brushing across the eaves of the monastery with the gentlest of sighs. The windows weep quietly with condensation as you pull your robe tighter and light a stub of beeswax candle. The hallway glows dimly, golden light flickering against stone. You pause for a moment near a small alcove that houses a statue of a saint, one of the many who reportedly intervened in agricultural matters. This one, you've been told, once blessed a particularly sour batch of goat cheese back into edibility. You make a note to say a little thank you next time your batch starts smelling a bit aggressive. But before we continue, let's do a little check-in. Hey everyone. We've reached this point. Have you drifted off to sleep yet? If you're still awake, drop a comment to let me know where you're at and how you're feeling. But if you're already fast asleep, I wish you a deep, restful sleep filled with beautiful dreams. Now then, where were we? Ah, yes, penance and cheese. Because here's the thing, monks didn't just make cheese. They reflected on it. They lived with it. And sometimes they suffered for it. In fact, the cellar where the cheese aged, that wasn't just a dairy room. It doubled as a space for reflection and, occasionally, repentance. Not in a dramatic dungeon way, mind you. More like a slightly moldy time-out corner. There are stories from several abbeys, mostly written in that overly dramatic monk Latin, of brothers who broke rules, sneaking extra rations, skipping prayers, being a bit too generous with the ale, and were sent to work alone in the cheese cellars as penance. You imagine one such monk, now robe dusted with flour and shame, gently flipping a wheel of smelly cheese in total silence while reflecting deeply on his sins. The scent of sulfurous rinds and spiritual regret mingling in the air. And oddly, it worked. Time in the cellar was humbling. It was cold, damp, isolated, but it also demanded focus. The cheese, after all, didn't care about your misdeeds. It needed turning. It needed salt. It needed a little love, even from the penitent. One abbey in central Italy supposedly had a rule: if a monk ate without permission, he'd be reassigned to what they called custodia caesae custody of the cheese, which, you have to admit, sounds way more intense than it is. Of course, this quiet obsession had practical roots. Cheese was a monastery's treasure, not just sustenance, but economy. Monasteries offered food and lodging to travelers, and cheese was a key ingredient in both. You join Brother Gerwin at the gatehouse as a muddy traveler arrives, sodden cloak, tired eyes, and a rather confused donkey in tow. The monk hands him a wedge of cheese wrapped in cloth and a small loaf of bread. All without a word. The man nods gratefully, then slumps against the stone wall, chewing with the kind of gratitude you don't often see anymore. In some regions, the reputation of a monastery's cheese was so renowned, noblemen would travel for days just to purchase a wheel or two. And not just for personal indulgence, cheese made an excellent gift, a diplomatic gesture, something to smooth over a land dispute or say thank you for not invading us last Lent. You hear about one particularly absurd story, possibly exaggerated, of a small abbey that settled a border dispute with a rival noble family by delivering a cheese wheel taller than a man, carved with the image of Saint Michael slaying a dragon. The noble was so amused he dropped the claim. Historians still argue whether the story's true or just monastic PR. You find that monks often gave their best cheeses away. It was a form of charity, a way to nourish both body and soul. One abbey distributed small wheels to the poor every Saturday, a humble ritual that continued for centuries. Of course, not everyone appreciated the finer notes of monastic cheese. There are letters grumpy, noble letters complaining about the rind of sulfur, or the sticky surface resembling mossy stones. One even suggests that the cheese caused visions, though whether those were divine or digestive in nature remains a mystery. Back in the cellar, you're shown an especially prized wheel, aging in a wooden box engraved with a saint's name. The monks call it Our Lady of the Creamy Interior. You're not sure if they're joking, but no one laughs. You breathe in its scent, ripe, almost floral, a little sweaty. One monk claims it cured his toothache. Another says it brought clarity to his sermons. You're too polite to mention it made your eyes water. That night, dinner is quieter than usual. You sit beside Brother Tomas, who carefully unwraps a slice of cheese that gleams gold in the candlelight. 3 years old, he whispers, turned every third day, sang to during Advent. You're not sure if he's serious, but you nod solemnly. Seems right. The taste is intense, nutty, slightly bitter, and somehow, oddly, peaceful. It fills your mouth, warms your throat, and settles somewhere near your heart like a soft blessing. You think about the hundreds, maybe thousands of monks who've repeated this exact act. The same recipe, the same silence, the same faint smell of hay and hope. Later, as you lie in your cell, rain drumming softly on the shutters, you listen to the quiet gurgle of water through the downspout. Somewhere nearby, A wheel of cheese rests under a linen cloth, slowly becoming itself, and you slowly drift off full of cheese, candlelight, and the oddly soothing rhythm of medieval dairy devotion. You wake to find the rain has finally stopped. In its place, morning fog clings low and thick to the fields outside the cloister walls. Everything looks dipped in silver. The trees are still. The air is wet and cold enough to make your teeth ache, but it smells clean like wet earth, crushed mint, and distant wood smoke. Today, Brother Aurelian tells you, is a feast day, which in monastery terms doesn't mean dancing and goblets of wine. No. Here, a feast day simply means slightly more food and slightly softer cheese. You follow a line of monks toward the refectory, the long stone dining hall where meals are taken in near silence. Long wooden tables stretch from wall to wall, their surfaces smooth from centuries of elbows and bowls. At each place setting a hunk of dark bread, a dish of lentils, and today only a slice of creamy white cheese flecked with herbs. It smells faintly of lemon balm and something else you can't quite place. Lavender. Maybe. You glance sideways. The monk beside you is already chewing slowly, eyes half closed in what could only be described as monastic bliss. Feast days were dotted throughout the monastic calendar, aligned with saints' days and other holy observances. They broke the monotony of fasting and offered a gentle reminder of the joys of communal living. The cheese served on these days. It wasn't just richer, it was celebratory. Some abbeys had special recipes reserved only for feast days. Wheels infused with crushed almonds, cheeses wrapped in vine leaves soaked in wine, even one strange, delightful concoction made with apple juice and wildflower petals. That one, Brother Tomas says, tastes like if heaven fell into a picnic basket. You chew thoughtfully. This cheese is firm on the outside, soft in the middle, slightly sweet, like cream stirred with clover. It's meant to be savored, and you do. After the meal, the monks file out to the gardens. Feast day or not, work still calls, but today's tasks are lighter. You're assigned to help with storing older cheeses, the kinds that have been aging for months or even years. These wheels are enormous, heavy with time and memory. Some are wrapped in cloths marked with red thread. Others rest on shelves made from ancient oak, their surfaces smooth and cool. You learn that monks kept meticulous records of each cheese's life story. When it was made, who made it, what herbs were added, and what the weather was like that week. Not because they were obsessed, okay. They were a little obsessed, but because each batch could be different. Milk from springtime cows tasted different from autumn milk. The grass changed, the cows changed, the world changed. One book you leaf through carefully. With gloved hands details a particularly prized wheel made during the great damp summer of 1282. According to the notes, it had a rind of quiet dignity, and a taste reminiscent of old parchment and walnuts. Apparently, it was served to a visiting bishop who declared it more spiritual than any sermon. High praise. You help rotate the wheels, checking for mold. Most of it is good mold. Expected. Friendly. Even. A bit fuzzy in spots. Blue in others. A little orange edge here or there. Brother Aurelian shows you how to gently wipe away anything too enthusiastic. Using a cloth soaked in herb vinegar. You ask him if that's to keep the cheese safe. He shrugs. Mostly, it's so it doesn't start speaking Latin on its own. Outside, the clouds part briefly, and a shaft of sunlight falls across the cloister walk. For a moment, everything glows the stone, the leaves, the robes of the monks crossing the courtyard. And you feel it again, that strange peace, that quiet assurance that here, in this slow place, everything has a purpose. Even mold. Later, during midday prayers, your thoughts drift. You try to focus. You really do. But your stomach is full. The chanting is soft, and the incense smells suspiciously like the herbs used in this morning's cheese. You wonder if that's intentional. It probably is. You start thinking about how even the rules of fasting made space for cheese. In many orders, milk and its products were allowed even when meat wasn't. Monks got creative. They turned cheese into spreads, stews, fillings for tiny savory pastries. Some even tried to whip it like cream. The results, Brother Gerwin whispers, were not spiritually uplifting. Of course, not all orders agreed. There were fierce, whispered debates in the margins of manuscripts over whether cheese counted as indulgence. One old text even refers to a great butter debate between two abbeys, each claiming the other was overly fond of dairy decadence. You imagine this argument happening in polite Latin over lunch, between monks chewing thoughtfully and gesturing with cheese knives. But for today, there are no debates, just gentle nods, full bellies, and the occasional soft burp from a monk who looks vaguely embarrassed. You suspect it was Brother Tomas. In the late afternoon, you visit the small apothecary garden. The herbs here aren't just for seasoning. Many were used in medicinal cheese, yes, that was a thing. Cheese blended with crushed garlic for infections, or with mint and ground seeds for gut demons, which you can only assume is medieval speak for indigestion. Brother Aurelian hands you a round wrapped in green cloth. It's labeled, feast, mild, good for sleep. You hold it like a treasure. Later, you will eat it quietly by candlelight and hope it lives up to its promise. As the sun slips behind the hills, the monks gather for evening prayers. You sit in the back, fingers still faintly sticky from herb-washed cheese. The chant rises low, slow, and impossibly calming. Your eyelids droop, and somewhere, or deep in the cellar, today's cheese rests beside tomorrow's. The air is thick with age, patience, and the promise of flavor yet to be born. The monastery sleeps, the cheese matures, and you gently slip into dreams. You wake to bird song, real birds, not metaphorical or stained glass doves, but actual, feathered, flapping birds. They trill from the orchard behind the chapel, voices sharp in the morning mist, as if reminding the monastery that silence is a man-made invention, and they will be observing no such vow. You stretch, joints cracking gently, and shuffle into your damp robe. It's always a little damp. You've accepted this now. Cheese monks, it seems, are simply moist people. Today's lesson, Brother Aurelian says with a knowing smile, is how to read the year in cheese. You raise an eyebrow, he simply nods. The rind tells all. You trail him to the cellar, where the wheels sit in tidy rows, each one a timeline of the seasons. Spring cheeses are pale and soft, touched with the faintest green from the wild herbs the cows graze on. Summer wheels are thicker, creamier, richer, full of clover and sunshine. Autumn ones turn golden, their rinds thicker, flavors deeper. And winter cheeses, they're firmer, saltier, more reserved. Like a monk in February, you run a finger across a winter wheel's rind. It feels waxy, cool, slightly rough. The monk beside you murmurs, "That one's from last year. Ate one like it during the ice storm. Tasted like firewood and victory." The cheese becomes a calendar. You learn that some monasteries used specific cheeses to mark liturgical periods: mild goat cheese for early Lent, aged wheels for Advent, and especially creamy bries for the feasts of saints associated with healing or hospitality. And there were so many saints. Saint Bridget of Kildare, for example, was famous not only for her miracles, but also for her generous milk-giving cow. Some Irish monks even honored her with butter sculptures. Imagine trying to sleep beside one of those during a hot summer vigil. Back in the scriptorium, you glimpse a recipe written in almost impossibly tiny script beside a line of psalms. It outlines how to make blessing cheese for use during seasonal ceremonies. Step 3 includes the instruction: sing the short form of Psalm 34 while rubbing with rosemary. You try not to giggle. This intersection of the sacred and the culinary feels strange at first, but the more time you spend here, the more it makes sense. Food is physical. Spirituality is often invisible. Cheese, oddly enough, sits in the middle, an earthly thing, made sacred through care, repetition, and patience. Brother Tomas's shows you a special cheese bell. It looks like something from a wizard shelf glass, domed with a carved oak base. This is where the Abbey's most prized seasonal cheese is displayed during certain feasts. Sometimes, a flower is placed beside it. Occasionally, a small note of thanks is tucked underneath, like a dairy prayer. Not all monasteries kept such refined rituals. In the Alpine regions, for instance, monks made huge wheels of mountain cheese enough to last through avalanche season. The cheese was so dense it had to be cut with wire, and so heavy it was stored on reinforced shelves. There are records of monks using these giant wheels as seating during particularly crowded chapters. No word on what happened if someone got up too fast and toppled one. You helped Brother Gerwin make a smaller seasonal batch today. He lets you choose the herbs, so you gather thyme, marjoram, and a few violet petals. He raises an eyebrow, but shrugs. Spring's coming. The cheese is pressed into a small round mold, wrapped in a fine linen soaked in wine. He tells you it'll be ready in about 40 sleeps. You blink. That's oddly precise, but it sticks in your brain. You already know which cheese you'll be dreaming of later. You help catalog wheels in the Abbey's storage room. This one, Brother Gerwin says, was made during a comet year. Another was started the day the roof fell in from heavy snow. One wheel cracked and bulging at the side bears the simple inscription, "The Bad Batch." No one speaks of it. Cheese here isn't just cheese. It's time captured, season by season. A memory you can chew. A moment you can smell. Outside, the orchard trees are budding, a sure sign that the milk will change soon. The cows will eat differently. The curds will feel softer. The monks will adjust. They always do. You find yourself reflecting in a world that barely moves now, without blinking lights and noisy alerts. There's something deeply restful in this rhythm. The slow turn of seasons. The long sleep of cheese. The quiet certainty that time doesn't have to shout to be heard. That night, dinner includes the last of the autumn wheels. It's dense, sharp, with a golden color that gleams in candlelight. You eat slowly, listening to the monk's quiet breath between bites. No one rushes. It's not that kind of world here. Afterward, you walk once around the cloister garden. The rain stopped. The stars are out. And the cheese is sleeping in its cellar, wrapped in time. The morning greets you with birdsong, again less insistent this time, as though even the birds have decided to whisper. A thin mist lingers over the fields, and the monastery's stone walls hold the cool breath of dawn. You feel it against your skin as you step outside, not quite cold, but definitely not warm. The kind of weather that makes you crave breakfast cheese. Today, you're told, is a brie day. You don't realize how serious that is until you arrive in the dairy room and find every monk working with a kind of reverent focus, usually reserved for relics or royal visitors. The air is thick with the scent of milk and rain-damp wool. Brother Aurelian, who has seen many cheeses come and go, simply nods toward the largest vat in the room and says, "Today we make softness. Brie in this monastery is more than a cheese. It's an event. It requires perfect milk early morning, slightly warm from the cow, full of spring herbs. It demands gentleness, and above all, it requires silence. You watch as the milk is slowly heated, the temperature gauged not with a thermometer, but with a bare hand dipped in and held very, very still. You try it. The milk is warm like bath water, like sleep. The curdling begins not with a bang, but with a whisper. The milk thickens gradually, a soft velvet ripple beneath the surface. Cutting the curds is done with a long, harp-like tool, a frame of thin wires that slices the curd without crushing it. The monks handle the instrument as if it's made of glass. The cut curds shimmer slightly in the morning light, and transferring them to the molds is the trickiest part. The curds are scooped gently into round molds lined with fine cloth. You quickly learn that too much pressure, too little patience, and the entire wheel collapses into mush. It must shape itself, Brother Tomas whispers. Like the spirit, you nod, feeling the weight of that wisdom. Even if you're not entirely sure what it means, the molds are left to drain slowly. No pressing. Brie, you discover, is all about yielding, letting gravity and time do the work. The monks turn the molds every few hours with a graceful, practiced flip, like flipping pancakes in slow motion. By afternoon, the wheels are firm enough to transfer to the aging room. Not the deep cellar, Brie prefers a slightly warmer, more humid place. The air smells faintly of mushroom and sweet hay. It's here that the rind will bloom, soft and white like snowflakes, dusting a velvet robe. One corner of the room holds older wheels, already cloaked in that signature white fluff. You touch one, it feels like a peach's skin, fragile and almost warm. A soft cheese developing a rind is a quiet miracle. It protects itself from decay while ripening from the inside. You could almost call it monastic. As you sit with the wheels, you hear a story from Brother Pascal. In the early days of this abbey, there was a cheese competition between neighboring monasteries. One side produced a dense, dry cheese fit for storage. The other, this abbey offered a soft, creamy wheel that made one noble weep openly at the dinner table. From that day on, Brie was their pride and joy. Historians still argue whether this nobleman was genuinely moved or simply lactose sensitive. Even among monasteries, soft cheeses were considered indulgent. Some stricter orders frowned upon them, seeing them as luxuries that distracted from spiritual clarity. But here, softness was a virtue. It reminded the monks that strength didn't always come from firmness. Sometimes it came from gentleness. You help with wrapping. Each wheel is encased in linen, sometimes marked with a delicate charcoal drawing a flower, a cross, once even a tiny fish. These symbols weren't just decoration, they were prayers, a quiet reminder that what's made by hand and time is worth blessing. You eat your first piece of monastery brie during the evening meal. It spreads like butter, smells faintly of fresh earth and wildflowers, and tastes like silence after a long hymn. The monks don't react much, but they cut their slices a little thicker than usual. You take that as a very high compliment. Later that night, as the rain returns in soft waves against your window, You lie in your cot and think about that cheese, how it starts so fragile, how it rests, how it trusts the quiet. And you, soft yourself now with sleep and warmth and fullness, follow its lead and drift gently into dreams. You wake to a curious scent in the air, not the usual warm milk and damp wool, but something sharper, funkier, and just the tiniest bit suspicious. You pull on your robe, bleary-eyed, and shuffle into the corridor, following the smell like a cartoon character chasing the scent of pie. It leads you, predictably, back to the dairy. Inside, Brother Tomas greets you with an enormous grin and a clothespin clipped to his nose. Today, he announces with a wink, we meet Brother Blue. You don't get a chance to ask if Brother Blue is a person, a cheese, or possibly a local ghost. The answer comes soon enough in the aging cellar. On the lowest shelf sits a collection of wheels streaked through with veins of mold the color of twilight. They smell, how shall we put this, like a medieval locker room after a fasting day. Blue cheese, you're told, is both an accident and a masterpiece. Legend has it that the first batch was born when a young monk left his lunch in a cave too long likely, while distracted by chanting or maybe a rogue goat. When he returned, the cheese had grown blue veins through its creamy center. Instead of tossing it out as any sane modern person might, he tasted it, because monks were, apparently, very brave. And it was good. Historians still argue whether the first blue cheese came from France, Italy, or somewhere else entirely. But what's certain is that once monks figured out how to replicate the mold Penicillium roqueforti, to be precise, they embraced the funk with open arms. Making blue cheese in a monastery is part science, part mystery. It begins, like most cheeses, with warm milk, rennet, and curds. But at a certain point, the monks sprinkle the mold into the mixture like powdered stardust. Then, after the curds are molded and drained, the wheels are pierced with long needles holes that allow air to reach inside, encouraging those signature blue veins to bloom. You try it yourself. The wheel is cool, firm, and just a bit damp. You jab the slender copper needle through the surface. There's a quiet satisfaction in it, like poking a sleeping loaf of bread. Each puncture is precise, intentional, a little invitation for the mold to grow. Brother Aurelian shows you how the blue begins to spread from those pinpricks curling through the cheese like ink and water. The process takes weeks, months, even. Patience, as always, is required. The cellar used for aging blue cheese is different from the other, slightly cooler, slightly more humid, and with a distinct atmosphere of mischief. The cheeses here don't behave. They bloat, they ooze, they sweat. Some monks swear they whisper at night. You wouldn't be surprised. The monks tend to them anyway. Flip them. Wash them. Take notes in leather-bound ledgers that smell of salt and ink. One monk even writes little poems beside particularly well-aged wheels. You spot a note that reads, Saint Barnabas Blue, bold as thunder, soft as dew, not bad. You ask how they know when it's ready. Brother Gerwin taps one wheel gently and listens, like a baker checking a loaf. It tells you. He says, eventually, lunch arrives, and with it, your first bite of monastery blue. It's sharp, bold, almost spicy. It hits the back of your throat with the force of an enthusiastic hymn, then melts into something soft, creamy, and surprisingly sweet. It tastes like a storm that remembered it was spring. It tastes like patience. Some monks eat it with apples, others with dark bread. Brother Tomas smuggles a sliver onto a dried fig and closes his eyes like he's receiving communion. You start to understand the obsession. Blue cheese is not just food. It's a mood, a statement, a test of faith. Later, you help label the newest batch. The wheels are marked with a blue wax seal and stamped with the symbol of a spiral meant to represent transformation, from milk to mold, from silence to flavor, from accident to art. Brother Aurelian shares one last story before Compline, a tale of a monk who loved his blue cheese so much. He tried to sneak a wheel into his robes before taking a vow of pilgrimage. The abbot caught him, of course, but instead of punishing him, he shared a slice and sent him on his way with a blessing and a chunk wrapped in linen. "You'll need it more than sandals," he'd said. You smile as you settle into bed that night, the sharp scent of blue cheese still clinging faintly to your sleeves. Outside, the rain has returned, tapping gently at the window. You think of the wheels in the cellar below, slowly growing their blue veins in the dark, whispering secrets to each other in the quiet. Rain again, the kind that feels like it's always been falling, soft and steady, as if the sky itself has joined the monastery's vow of gentle persistence. The stones underfoot are slick, and the morning smells like wet wood, wool, and warm milk. The cows don't mind. They never do. You follow Brother Thomas back to the dairy, still rubbing sleep from your eyes. "Charity Day," he whispers, as if revealing a secret. Time to share, once a week, sometimes more. During feast seasons, the monks prepare special cheese portions for the local poor, pilgrims, or anyone who arrives at the gates hungry and in need. It's an old tradition, probably older than the cheese itself. Today's batch is mild, creamy, and easy to cut. The kind of cheese that spreads across bread without effort. The kind of cheese that comforts without needing explanation. You help Brother Gerwin slice it into generous wedges, each one wrapped in clean linen stamped with the Abbey's seal. Before you set out, though, let's take a moment. Hey everyone, we're halfway through our story. Have you drifted off to sleep yet? If you're still awake, drop a comment to let me know what part of the world you're listening from. Or just tell me if you're Team Bree or Team Blue. Either way, I'm wishing you peace, rest, and a belly full of cozy dreams. Now, back to the monastery. The monks gather at the gates beneath their hooded cloaks, baskets in hand. The rain drips from the eaves like strings of glass beads. A few villagers are already wading muddy boots, wet cloaks, grateful eyes. The exchange is quiet, reverent. No money changes hands, just food, just warmth. You hand a portion to an older man who clasps it like it's a sacred relic. "Bless you," he murmurs. You nod, unsure what to say. Brother Tomas simply pats the man's shoulder and moves on. These small acts of charity aren't grand, but they're constant, steady, like the chant at evening prayers, or the cows trudging in for milking. The monks see it as part of their calling, not just to pray, not just to toil, but to nourish. In some monasteries, historical records show entire dairies were built solely to produce cheese for charitable purposes. A few even ran what we might now call soup kitchens, except the menu leaned more toward crusty bread, cheese, and ale. Honestly, you'd eat there. Cheese made for charity had its own recipes, simple, less aged, easier to produce quickly and in larger amounts. But it wasn't lesser cheese. In fact, some monks believed the cheese given away should be the very best. After all, it was going to Christ in the form of the stranger. You head back inside, the basket now empty, and your robe damp around the edges. Brother Gerwin stokes the fire while Brother Aurelian prepares another batch. More will come tomorrow. There's always someone who needs feeding. This spirit of quiet generosity runs deep. One old monk's journal recounts how his abbey gave away nearly every wheel during a famine year. The cellar was empty, he writes, but our hearts were not. That particular monk was later canonized not necessarily for his cheesemaking, but you suspect it didn't hurt. During lunch, the mood is light. The monks sit a little closer together, as if the giving has made the meal sweeter. Today's cheese is something called soft wheel of mercy. You ask if that's a joke. Brother Tomas only grins. It's creamy and a little nutty, with a rind that looks like someone painted it with gold dust. Probably just mold, but beautiful nonetheless. You remember something Brother Aurelian once said while wiping mold from a slightly lopsided wheel. Cheese, like people, is rarely perfect, but cared for. It softens. The afternoon brings a different kind of sharing. A merchant has arrived from a nearby town, bearing spices, dried fruits, and something wrapped tightly in cloth. Cheese. From another abbey, the monks gather like children around a cake. Carefully, reverently, the cloth is unwrapped to reveal a pale, ash-covered wheel with a thin, fragrant rind. A letter is tucked beside it, scrawled in tight script. May this wheel speak peace between us. Abbey of St. Remigius. Monasteries often exchange cheese, not just for variety, but as a gesture of goodwill. Cheese diplomacy, delicious treaties, It was, as Brother Gerwin puts it, the soft power of soft rinds. You taste it during Vespers. It's tangy, earthy, with a hint of smoke. A strange cheese, but a welcome one. That night, you find yourself back in the aging room, checking the progress of yesterday's wheels. The blue is blooming. The brie is softening. Everything smells slightly of mushrooms and memory. You sit on a low stool and close your eyes. The rain begins again, slow, steady, just enough to echo through the cloister halls. Down here in the dark, the cheese sleeps, and so gently. Do you? There's something different in the air this morning, still damp, still cool, but charged with a quiet excitement. The kind of subtle buzz that only monks could pull off. Today, you learn, is copying day. You tilt your head. Copying what? Recipes. Of course. You follow Brother Aurelian to the scriptorium, a long hall lined with high windows and wooden desks. Here, the monks transcribe texts, psalms, letters, calendars, and cheese recipes, entire tomes dedicated to dairy. You'd always imagined monks copying the Gospels with quills and candlelight, but apparently, cheese earned its place right alongside Scripture. The cheese codices are kept in the warmest corner of the room, large, heavy, and smelling faintly of old ink and dried thyme. These books are bound in thick leather, their pages crinkled and dark at the edges. They're beautiful. In a slightly unhinged way, margins filled with notes, scribbles, and the occasional sketch of a cow with suspiciously human eyes. You're handed one called Liber Cassae Divini, the Book of Divine Cheese. Inside, you find recipes written in Latin so ancient it might as well be Martian. Fortunately, Brother Tomas reads aloud in a slow, steady voice, translating as he goes. To prepare the cheese for winter fasting, warm the milk as though for a new calf. Add the herb of patience. The herb of patience, you ask? Probably mint, he replies. Maybe rosemary. Possibly nothing. You quickly realize that most of these recipes are more poetic than practical. One instructs the monk to stir the curds until they begin to hum the song of Saint Anthony. Another describes the ideal brine as saltier than the tears of confession, but less bitter than envy, helpful, and yet these texts were treated with the utmost care. Illuminated letters, ink made from oak galls, margins filled with annotations like Brother Ambrosius added extra salt. Regretted it. You start to understand these weren't just instructions. They were stories. They were memory. One of the oldest books includes a recipe attributed to a wandering monk from Moorish Spain, detailing a goat cheese infused with cinnamon and orange peel. A surprising mix, but there it is, in looping script, annotated with a modest, surprisingly pleasant. Not all entries are so straightforward. Some are barely legible. Others have been copied so many times that errors have crept in, making the measurements a gamble. One recipe ends with the cryptic note, "Serve only to those you love," or those you wish to test. You try your hand at copying. The quill feels awkward, the ink too thick. You blot the page twice before you find a rhythm. The Latin comes slowly, lac calidum, something something curd. You're not quite ready to take over as Abby's scribe, but your penmanship is slightly better than Brother Gerwin's, whose G looks like a cow falling down a hill. Lunch today includes a cheese whose recipe you copied more by luck than accuracy. It's crumbly, dry, and smells faintly of lavender and regret. Brother Thomas chews it with a thoughtful expression and says, "A bit forward, but brave." You consider that a win. After the meal, you visit the cheese cellar again, this time to compare the labels to the recipe books. Each wheel is a chapter, a translation, a living version of ink on parchment. Some are labeled in Latin, others in Old French, some with only symbols likely created by monks who couldn't write, but still needed a way to distinguish their contribution. One mark, you learn, is simply a drawing of a sun. It signifies summer milk, lightly salted, excellent with pears. You find yourself wondering how many recipes were lost over time, tucked into corners of books that crumbled, carried away by monks on pilgrimage, or deliberately hidden because the cheese was, well, a bit too experimental. There's even talk of a legendary recipe, long lost, known only as the Weeping Wheel. Supposedly, it was so delicious that the abbot who tasted it burst into tears and declared it too heavenly for earthly consumption. No one's found the full recipe, just fragments. But the monks whisper about it now and then, half in jest, half in hope. Before evening prayers, you return your borrowed tome to the shelf, hands stained with ink and the faint smell of nutmeg from that one curious recipe involving boiled milk and ground almonds. You sit quietly in the scriptorium, watching the candle flames flicker in their sconces. The rain has softened again, just a patter against the high windows. You realize something. Sitting there amid the books, cheese wasn't just eaten here. It was remembered, chronicled, preserved in words as well as wax. And somewhere below you, the cheeses sleep in silence, their stories unfolding one quiet day at a time. You awaken before the bells today, an accidental early riser in a world that rarely rushes. The rain has stopped, replaced by a hush so complete it feels like the monastery has been wrapped in wool. You step outside and find the sky painted with soft gray and the faintest blush of morning. It's the kind of quiet that makes you walk slower, breathe softer, and wonder what you've just stepped into. Brother Aurelian waves you over from the cloister walk, his hands full of folded linens. "Come," he says gently. "It's a miracle morning." You blink. Did he just say miracle? You follow him, naturally. Today's task, inspecting the miracle shelf. It sounds grand, but it's just a long wooden plank in a back corner of the aging room, marked with a carved star and a faint smudge of soot. Here, the monks store wheels that by their own account have done something unusual, or at least unexplained. The first wheel you examine is a hard, dark-rinded cheese from last year. Supposedly, it never molded, not once. No turning, no washing. Just sat there, quietly aging like an old saint, waiting for canonization. Brother Tomas claims it was accidentally left in the cellar over winter, completely forgotten, and was found months later, still perfectly edible. Tasted like nutmeg and patience, he says, eyes misty. You try a slice. It tastes fine, not divine exactly, but comforting in a you won't die from this kind of way. Maybe the miracle was that it wasn't terrible. The next wheel is covered in what looks like golden dust. You lean in. It's not mold, it's pollen, apparently. A swarm of bees took a brief interest in the aging room 2 summers ago and dusted just this wheel before retreating. The monks now refer to it as the Blessed Bloom. It's reserved for high feast days or very long winters. Then there's the no-crack wheel, which has reportedly never cracked under pressure. A remarkable feat, considering the erratic humidity of medieval cheese cellars. Some monks whisper that it was started during a midnight vigil, and that its perfect shape is the result of divine symmetry. Others say it's just because Brother Pascal didn't forget the salt that time, but the most whispered about wheel, kept in a stone box lined with linen and dried sage, is St. Mildred's round. Legend says it was gifted to a sick nun who couldn't keep food down until she ate a single bite of this cheese and immediately felt strong enough to walk again. Some call it coincidence, others miracle. Historians still argue whether any of this actually happened or whether monks, like everyone else, simply enjoyed a good story. You suspect it's both. After all, who doesn't want to believe in a cheese that heals? Later in the morning, you visit the chapel for a brief service. As the monks chant, you find your mind drifting not rudely, just gently, like it always seems to in this place. You think about miracles, about the line between patience and magic, about the way something as humble, curdled milk can become sacred when tended with care. After prayers, you help prepare a special lunch. A visiting priest is arriving from a neighboring region, and the monks want to offer their best. Brother Gerwin slices one of the miracle wheels with a reverence normally reserved for relics. You arrange fresh herbs, walnuts, and slices of dark bread around it. It's not a feast, but it's enough to feel holy. The priest is older, sharp-eyed, and very quiet. He says little during the meal, but when he takes his first bite of the Blessed Bloom, he pauses, slowly chews, nods, then says only, the monks beam. After lunch, you help wash a few wheels that might, one day, earn a place on the miracle shelf. You're told not to aim for miracles. They happen or they don't. But care is always worth it, even if the result is just pretty decent. Brother Aurelian, hands you a cloth soaked in wine and herbs. You rub it gently across the rind of a squat little wheel, labeled only number 19. Doesn't look miraculous. In fact, it smells faintly of onion, but who knows? Stranger cheeses have earned reverence. Before supper, a young novice shares a tale in the garden. He heard of a monastery in the Alps where the cheese sings, like actual singing, he insists, only during thunderstorms. You ask if he's serious. He shrugs. Maybe it's just the shelves creaking, but maybe not. You like that answer? Dinner is simple lentil stew and slices of a mild cheese with a whisper of sage. It's soft, almost creamy, with just enough salt to wake up your tongue. Nothing miraculous, but good, satisfying. As darkness falls and the candlelight wavers in your little cell, you lie in bed and think about those cheeses, the ones that aged perfectly, that healed, that hummed like thunder, or bees, or God. You think maybe the miracle isn't in the cheese. Maybe it's in the care, the attention, the willingness to believe that even something slow, quiet, and ordinary can become extraordinary. And with that thought warming you like a blanket, you fall asleep. It's just before dawn when the shouting starts. Well, shouting might be too strong a word. This is a monastery, after all. It's more of an urgent whispering, with the occasional raised eyebrow and the sharp slap of sandals against wet stone. You sit up in your cot, blink the sleep from your eyes, and catch two monks speed walking past your cell with the determination of men late for a very serious cheese appointment. You throw on your robe, still faintly smelling of sage and yesterday's miracle, and follow the commotion. The hallway leads you, unsurprisingly, back to the cheese cellar. And there, in the torchlit gloom, is a scene of quiet, monastic chaos. Two shelves have collapsed, wheels of cheese, dozens of them have rolled onto the floor like curious children. Some have cracked, a few are leaking. One has landed squarely on Brother Gerwin's foot, and he's wearing the expression of a man trying to suffer nobly through a very stubbed toe. But the real issue, some of the wheels aren't theirs. This is the Holy Rind rivalry. Turns out, another monastery just up the valley, small but ambitious, had delivered a few gifts of their own cheese earlier in the week. Samples, really, a friendly offering. But now, amidst the debris, two of those wheels have been mistaken for the abbey's own. Brother Aurelian is examining one of them closely, sniffing its rind with the seriousness of a bishop inspecting relics. Too smooth, he mutters. This is foreign. Apparently, this is not the first time such confusion has occurred. Quietly, calmly, and with a surprising amount of passive-aggressive energy, monasteries across the region have, for years, been engaged in subtle cheese competition. Not war, that would be unseemly, just friendly feuding via flavor. One abbey favors a strong, smoky rind aged in wine barrels. Another insists that real cheese should squeak when sliced. Yours, of course, champions subtlety. balance, and the occasional miraculous bee involvement. The tension isn't open, it lives in polite notes, curd critiques written in tiny script, and gift baskets with wheels just slightly better than the last ones exchanged. There's even a small, well-hidden ledger in the scriptorium titled Comparative Notes Rhymes of Rivalry. Inside, monks have recorded tasting impressions of every visiting wheel for the past 50 years. You flip through it with fascination later that morning. June 1193. Received a semi-hard goat cheese, tangy, overly enthusiastic rind, possible hint of betrayal, Lent 1201. Unexpected brie, too soft, possibly intentional insult. Feast of Saint Bartholomew, 1208. Molded sheep's milk, slightly arrogant. Very good. You learned that a few years ago. The abbey up the hill sent a cheese so aggressively aged that your monks interpreted it as a challenge. In response, Brother Gerwin sent back a wheel of his strongest blue, wrapped in nettle leaves and marked with a single word, patience. No one ever mentioned it again, but the other abbey has not sent anything since. Today, though, the dropped wheels must be sorted, salvaged, or if too damaged, surrendered to the cooking pile. Some monks do this grimly. Others look a little too excited to dispose of the rival cheese in a pot of soup. You're put in charge of tasting one wheel that's cracked but still edible. It's dense, nutty, a little too sharp on the back of the tongue. You raise an eyebrow. Definitely not ours. Brother Tomas confirms. For lunch, you are served 2 slices, one yours, one not. You're asked to compare. Yours is smooth, faintly herbal, gentle on the palate. The other is bold, creamy, and slightly chaotic, a little like the monks who made it. You chew thoughtfully. Maybe both are good. You say, Brother Aurelian looks at you like you've just suggested they install stained glass windows with jokes on them. Still, there's no denying the truth. Cheese styles reflect their makers. Humble wheels, loud wheels, wheels with names like Divine Bloom or The Aching Silence, each a fingerprint. That night, after compline, you find a small note tucked beneath your cot. It's unsigned. It simply says we may not win every rivalry, but at least we don't add raisins. You chuckle, softly. The rain has returned, as it always does. Outside your window, it plays a lullaby on the tiled roof. Below, the monks tidy the cellar, rearranging the salvaged wheels and gently rotating the ones still intact. Even amidst the rivalry, the cheese continues to age, to soften, to breathe, and you close your eyes, warmed by the absurdity of medieval pettiness and the deep comfort of a world where even grudges are aged with care. The morning smells like wet wood smoke and boiled oats, a combination you've come to associate with particularly philosophical days. The kind where monks speak a little more slowly, stare out of windows a little longer, and ask questions like, is butter a moral risk? You don't know it yet. But today will be about an old and sacred debate, the butter ban. It begins quietly. Brother Gerwin invites you to help prepare the day's rations in the small stone kitchen. You're slicing bread and wiping down a cheese wheel marked feast, mild, advent. Everything feels perfectly ordinary until he leans in and whispers, "There was a time we didn't allow butter here." You blink. At all. He nods solemnly, then wipes his hands on his robe and says, "Come. It's time you learned." You follow him into the library, not the scriptorium, but the darker, older library, the one that smells like vellum and mushrooms and forbidden knowledge. There, tucked between theological treatises and monastic bee-care manuals, lies a shelf labeled Dairy Disputes. He pulls out a book bound in soft leather, marked with a melted wax seal and the word oleum, Latin for oil or, depending on interpretation, that which confuses fasting monks. Inside are pages and pages of debate. Marginalia, arguing about whether butter should be allowed during fasting. Some entries are furious in tone, others almost poetic. The central question is butter indulgent? It sounds silly until you read the arguments. One monk compares butter to the slippery path of pride. Another warns that it melts too quickly upon the tongue and invites sloth. Someone even refers to it as the custard of cow vanity. You try not to laugh. Butter, apparently, was a serious matter, and at the heart of the debate cheese, because while butter was soft and seductive, cheese was firm, humble, and so, according to many, more honest. Cheese took time, patience. It resisted quick pleasures. Butter, on the other hand, could be churned in an afternoon and spread without resistance. That made some monks suspicious. Still, not all orders agreed. Monasteries in colder regions argued that butter was a necessity, especially in winter, when other fats were scarce. Some abbeys allowed it only on specific days. Others forbade it entirely and used nut oil instead. The Cistercians were famously anti-butter for a time, which only made their cheese that much more impressive. Let the butter be banished. One abbot wrote that the cheese may shine brighter. You're not sure if that was literal or metaphorical. Either way, it sounds delicious. Later, during a brief break, you join Brother Tomas near the fire. He's eating a slice of rye bread with a generous smear of herbed butter, clearly unbothered by the old rules. "Doesn't count if it's not Lent," he says, before licking a bit of it off his thumb. Then, with a wink, he adds, "Also, this butter is mostly cheese pretending to be butter. So technically, I'm still virtuous. In the afternoon, you help churn, it's harder than it looks. The heavy wooden churn demands steady rhythm, and your arms ache after just a few minutes. But the process is oddly satisfying. Milk becomes cream. Cream becomes soft gold. And everything starts to smell like summer meadows. Brother Aurelian lets you flavor a batch. You choose wild garlic and rosemary. The result is shockingly good, too good. You wonder if this is what the stricter monks feared pleasure. Simple, unassuming joy. During Vespers, the chant seems to hang a little longer in the air. Perhaps it's the butter, still on your breath. Or maybe it's the faint rumble of distant thunder, promising yet another round of cleansing rain. That night's dinner includes both butter and cheese. No one mentions the old debates, but the moment Brother Gerwin's knife skates smoothly across a slice of buttered cheese toast, you hear him whisper, "Slippery path or not, this is worth the risk." You go to bed with a full belly and a head spinning with curd theology. As you drift off, you dream of two monks in a candlelit room, arguing quietly about dairy, each holding a wheel of cheese like a shield and a pat of butter like a sword. And outside, in the cold cellar, the cheeses age on, calm, patient, unbothered by the great butter debate. You're halfway through breakfast when it happens. A sharp clink, the sound of ceramic on stone, a startled cough, and the unmistakable creak of someone sneaking. You look up just in time to see Brother Alban shuffle back to his seat, cheeks slightly pink, hands suspiciously empty. The monks say nothing, but several glance at the shelf where a wheel of last night's dinner cheese once sat, now conspicuously absent. You, it seems, have stumbled into one of the monastery's oldest and sleepiest controversies, the theology of the midnight snack. Brother Aurelian explains it with a smile later. As you help him turn a batch of small, soft wheels, "We don't officially eat between Compline and Lauds," he says, "but cheese has a way of calling." It turns out that, despite all their discipline, monks are human, and cheese, especially a perfectly ripe one sitting unattended in the dining hall, can be a powerful tempter. There are even records of specific cheeses that gained reputations for mysterious disappearances. One, noted in a 13th century logbook from a French abbey, was nicknamed the Vanishing Brother. It reportedly vanished 3 nights in a row, reappeared half-eaten on a windowsill, and eventually was stored in a locked cabinet labeled "for vigils only." Historians still argue whether this was theft or shared delusion. Either way, it became legend. You hear more stories throughout the morning of monks who crept barefoot to the pantry under cover of darkness, of cheese stashes hidden inside prayer books, of one ambitious brother who once tried to bribe the bell ringer to cover his footsteps with extra clangs. He was caught, of course, but the abbey admired the creativity. Brother Tomas admits to sneaking a nibble or two strictly for quality control. You find a half-eaten hunk of blue cheese hidden behind a sack of lentils later that afternoon and pretend not to notice. To be fair, cheese was often necessary for those long, cold hours of vigil. Monks would rise before dawn, chant psalms by candlelight, and sometimes walk laps around the cloister to stay awake. A small, smuggled wedge of cheese wasn't indulgence. It was survival. There were even theological attempts to justify it. One particularly tired scribe once wrote, "He who labors in silence and darkness may receive humble sustenance, so long as the rind is firm and the portion small." That line was eventually crossed out, but the sentiment stuck. Monasteries even developed rules about which cheeses were more appropriate for after hours. Soft cheeses, they said, were too luxurious, too easy to eat, too pleasurable. Harder cheeses required effort, chewing, restraint. They were, in short, more virtuous. You're not sure if you agree. The soft cheese is better. This evening, after Compline, you linger in the cloister courtyard. The sky is starless, blanketed in thick mist. Somewhere nearby, a wheel of cheese waits under a cloth, its scent slowly filling the cold night air. A quiet cough, footsteps. A shadow crosses the stone path robe, rustling just slightly. You watch, amused, as Brother Alban slips into the refectory, a small linen bundle hidden beneath his sleeve. You follow, carefully, and find him already seated on a bench, biting into a modest wedge with reverence. He doesn't look guilty, just peaceful. "Couldn't sleep," he murmurs, chewing thoughtfully. This helps. You sit beside him and share a slice. It's mild, a little tangy, the kind that lingers just long enough to warm the mouth. You eat in silence. Two sleepy pilgrims sharing a moment in the dark. Then, remembering where we are in our journey, "Hey everyone, we've reached this point. Have you drifted off to sleep yet? If you're still awake, I'd love to know. Are you a midnight snacker too? Drop a comment, maybe share your favorite sleepy snack, or just say hi from wherever you're listening tonight. And if you're already curled into a cozy dream, I hope it's a sweet one." Back in the refectory, Brother Alban wipes his hands on his robe and stands. "We'll deny it, of course," he says, "but some cheeses are meant for moonlight." You nod, still chewing. As he disappears into the shadowy hallway, you linger for just a moment longer. The candle's glow flickers against the stone. Somewhere beneath your feet, the cellar breathes slowly, and you, once again, drift into the gentle rhythm of silence, softness, and sleep. There's a crispness to the morning air that wasn't there yesterday. Not cold, exactly just brisk. Awake, like the world has been freshly ironed. You wrap your robe tightly around yourself and join the monks gathering near the outer gate, their baskets lined with cloth and optimism. Today is cheese on the road day. You'd think cheese doesn't travel well, but you'd be wrong. Monasteries across the medieval world became experts in producing cheese that could survive journeys long ones, across mountains, through forests, even on the back of a dusty mule headed for the Holy Land. Brother Aurelian hoists a basket into your arms and grins. "Pilgrims need protein," he says, "and our cheese has a calling." You follow the group toward the traveler's house just outside the monastery gate, a small, squat building where pilgrims sleep, eat, and trade stories with the tired hush of those who've seen too many roads and not enough pillows. Inside, two travelers are already sipping warm broth, their cloaks steaming gently near the hearth. One's from the South Spain, maybe. The other, possibly, from the East. Hard to say. Their faces are weathered, eyes alert, feet blistered. But when Brother Tomas presents a wheel of dense, dry cheese, both men smile with the gratitude of saints. This is cheese for travel hard, salty, and firm enough to double as a weapon in a pinch. It's aged for months, sometimes years. Monks designed these wheels to survive extremes: rain, sun, wind, saddle packs, and the occasional dog. You learn the secret is in the brining heavily salted and rubbed with vinegar, sometimes oil. Some wheels were wrapped in wax-soaked linen, others in ash or herbs. The goal: protection, preservation, longevity. You help slice the cheese into sturdy wedges, each one wrapped in fresh cloth and tied with a little loop, easy to hang from a belt or staff. A small piece of dried apple is added to each parcel, a gentle sweetness against the salt, a quiet blessing. You imagine the journey ahead, the jostling carts, the long nights, the rivers to cross and cities to pass. This cheese won't melt. It won't spoil. It might, after a week or two, even improve. The monks call it traveler's patience cheese that tastes better the more tired you are. After the travelers leave, bellies full and packs slightly heavier, you visit the abbey's storage room. There, you find wheels marked with strange symbols, ones you haven't seen before. Brother Gerwin explains, these were made for the Crusaders. You raise an eyebrow. Actual Crusaders. He nods. Hard cheese. Soaked in wine brine. Smelled terrible. Lasted forever. During the Crusades, monastic cheese was a staple provision. Lightweight, rich in calories, easy to transport. Some monasteries made nothing but Crusader cheese for entire seasons. One record from an English abbey mentions a batch of cheddar so sharp, the soldiers used it as currency in Damascus. Another note claims a single wheel once cracked a helmet, not on purpose. Presumably, pilgrims, too, relied on monastic cheese. Whether heading to Rome, Santiago, or Jerusalem, they needed food that didn't require fire or refrigeration. Cheese was salvation wrapped in cloth, tied to a staff, eaten under a hedge in the rain, and when they returned, if they returned, they brought new recipes with them. You see it in the books, a blend of goat and sheep milk from the Levant, a dried curd rubbed with cinnamon, a strange technique involving pressed fig leaves. Historians still argue whether these were true innovations or desperate guesses, but the flavor of travel made its way home, curled into the quiet corners of abbey cellars. You help label a batch headed for a caravan traveling north. Each wheel is etched with a compass rose, a little joke among the monks. In case it gets lost, Brother Tomas says, grinning, lunch is simple yesterday's lentil stew, crusty bread, and a slice of traveler's cheese. It's dense, crumbly, so salty your lips sting. But there's a depth to it, a kind of fatigue baked in. You chew slowly, imagining a muddy road and the comfort of pulling this from your bag as thunder rumbles above. Later, in the refectory, Brother Aurelian tells you about an old monk who once spent 10 years making the perfect portable cheese. He failed, mostly, he says, but he discovered something close. Lasted 7 weeks in a damp boot. You can't help but smile. There's nobility in the attempt. Evening comes, mist rolling in over the fields. The traveler's house is quiet now. Its bed's empty, blankets folded, but the scent of melted cheese and ash lingers in the air, a soft reminder that something sustaining passed through. Back in the cellar, the wheels destined for the road rest a little longer, their surfaces hardening, bracing for the journey. You curl into your bed, fingers still smelling faintly of brine, and wonder where those wheels will go, who will bite into them on some muddy road, beneath some foreign star. And with that thought, you sleep. You wake to the sound of something being smuggled, not loudly, not clumsily, just a soft, padded thump, followed by the creak of a wooden door and the unmistakable whisper of a robe brushing against stone. You wait a beat, then two, and curiosity overtaking comfort. You rise and follow the sound. It leads you predictably to the back stairwell near the kitchen, the one that dips down into a corridor rarely used in daylight. A passage of flickering torchlight and suspiciously quiet echoes. At the bottom, Brother Tomas stands beside a sack, a cheese wheel-sized sack. He grins sheepishly. "You didn't see anything," he says, and then gestures for you to follow. Today, you're going to learn about a not-so-holy habit monastic cheese smuggling. It started, you're told, innocently enough. A few too many wheels produced in spring. A friend of the abbey who ran a tavern in the nearby town. The quiet trade, 1 cheese for 3 sacks of barley. Everyone benefited, but soon, other abbeys caught on. Not every region had the same pasture land. Some couldn't make their own brie. Others lacked cows altogether. So the monks at your abbey, modest, cheese-rich, and very persuasive, began to share, quietly, for favors. The barter system grew. Wheels slipped into carts of cabbages, rinds buried beneath linen. Entire batches disguised in barrels marked pickled beets. You help lift 1 such barrel today. It smells very much like cheese and absolutely nothing like beets. Monks became masters of covert transport. Brother Alban once disguised a full wheel beneath his robe and walked 3 miles without detection. His back hasn't been the same since. You learn that, in some abbeys, cheese smuggling was an open secret. There were codes. A candle left unlit at the side door meant a buyer was waiting. 2 coughs during Vespers meant the cart was already loaded. One monk, nicknamed the Silent Rind, once made 3 round trips in 1 week without ever being seen. At least, that's the story. Historians still argue whether he existed at all. or was simply invented to pass blame when too many wheels went missing. The townsfolk knew, of course. Everyone did. But cheese was too good, too vital, too valuable to question. Inns served monastery cuts. Taverns offered abbot slices. Even nobles quietly requested the cheese with the hymn still in it. Some monks felt uneasy. There were debates. Was this commerce? Was it corruption? Or just practical charity? One diary entry you read says, "We do not sell the cheese. We merely allow it to travel. And if coin happens to arrive afterward, well, the Lord moves mysteriously. You help load a new batch into a cart bound for the harbor. This particular shipment is headed to a distant abbey in the north, one struggling with drought. The cheese is packed carefully in straw-lined crates, marked simply, textiles, fragile. It's not exactly honest, but it's not dishonest either. It's flexible. Lunch today is celebratory. A rare import from one of the abbeys, your monks supply a sheep's milk cheese wrapped in fig leaves, sharp and creamy, with a smoky aftertaste that reminds you of driftwood and candle stubs. Brother Aurelian chews slowly and says, "We gave them 10 wheels last autumn. I suppose this is their thanks." Then, with a pause, he adds, "Fair trade." In the afternoon, you help write the ledger entries, discreet ones. No mention of names, just dates, codes, and the occasional sketch of a wheel with suspiciously broad shoulders. It's clear the Abbey has kept meticulous records. Quiet commerce dressed up as very well-organized generosity. There are notes on prices too, mostly in favors. A load of firewood, repairs to the chapel roof, a shipment of rare herbs, sometimes even labor a carpenter for 3 days in exchange for 2 wheels aged through Advents. It's a delicate dance, and the monks walk it gracefully. You're even shown the secret cupboard, hidden behind a false panel in the cellar. Inside, a few special wheels rare, experimental, or especially valuable. Insurance, Brother Tomas says, or gifts, depending on the day. As dusk falls, the last cart rolls out of the monastery gate. The driver nods once, then disappears into the fog. You and Brother Alban linger near the wall. "We don't call it smuggling," he says. "We call it distributing blessings creatively." You nod. It fits. The bells ring for Compline. The day winds down, and in some distant village, a weary traveler is handed a slice of cheese wrapped in linen and prayers, never knowing how many quiet footsteps it took to get there. You return to your cell, the scent of straw and aged rind still clinging to your robe, and feel the gentle pride of having participated in something ancient, delicate, and just the tiniest bit sneaky. And with the rain softly beginning again outside, you drift into a sleep as deep and slow as a well-aged wheel tucked beneath a cloak. You awaken to a rare brightness, a buttery, golden light that slips through the narrow window and paints warm rectangles across your stone floor. The rain has stopped, for now. The air is crisp, the sky a soft blue. brushed with high, lazy clouds. Today, Brother Aurelian says, you're not stirring, slicing, or smuggling. Today, you're learning how monks made their cheese. Sacred, not spiritually. Technically, it starts in the tool room. It's more of a workshop, really tucked behind the stables, filled with the smell of wood, smoke, and beeswax. Here, tools hang in neat rows, wooden paddles, curved knives, cheese stamps, and cheese presses that look suspiciously like torture devices. You're assured they're not. Brother Pascal, the monastery's unofficial craftsman, beckons you over to a large press made from oak, iron, and many years of stubbornness. Built this one before the comet, he says cryptically, patting the worn wood. Still better than the new ones. You help him load curds into a mold, a hefty wooden ring lined with linen. Then, slowly, the press lowers. A groaning creak, a gentle squelch, and the curds begin their final transformation. Monks knew that good cheese needed good tools. Presses carved from dense hardwoods, molds lined with fragrant herbs or seasoned cloth. Even the shelves used for aging were selected for how they breathed or didn't. Everything mattered. You're handed a wire knife next thin and tight like a harp string, designed not to crush, but to slice cleanly through curds. It's surprisingly elegant. You try it, carefully. The curd parts like soft clay. One of the oldest tools in the room is a paddle shaped like a leaf, not for stirring, but for blessing, used to trace the sign of the cross into the curds before they're molded. A little tradition, Brother Gerwin murmurs, to keep the bad spirits out and the good flavor in. You notice that every tool has a story. A press said to be carved from the wood of a lightning-struck tree. A mold that once made cheese for a visiting queen. A scoop with a knot in the handle where a novice carved his initials 200 years ago. These objects aren't just functional, they're sacred relics of a quieter kind. After mid-morning prayers, you're invited to the washing table, not of hands, but of wood. Monks wash their tools with herb water thyme, rosemary, and bay steeped in boiling liquid until it smells like a medieval forest in bloom. The idea, Brother Tomas says, is that the herbs keep bad molds away while encouraging the good ones. Some molds, he says with a wink, are just cranky roommates. Others are thieves. Historians still argue about the efficacy of these herbal washes. But the tradition persists. Monks trust their noses more than their books. If it smells right, it probably is. You're asked to rub down a long cheese mold with vinegar and lemon balm. The wood is worn smooth from centuries of use. You can feel the grooves carved by time and repetition, by hands long gone. Later, you step into the salt room. Not a fancy spa, unfortunately. Just a low, cool space lined with troughs of brine. Here, cheeses soak hours, sometimes days, depending on their size and spirit. Brine recipes vary. Some are simple salt and water, others include wine, herbs, or a splash of beer. Brother Pascal swears by a handful of dried apple peel for complexity. You're not sure it does anything, but the cheese smells wonderful afterward. The presses, paddles, and molds are treated with reverence. And why not? These were the instruments that shaped the very food that sustained monks through fasting, feasts, and the occasional theological meltdown. The abbey even has a special room, a storage closet, really where broken tools are laid to rest. The monks call it the quiet rack. It's lined with worn-out paddles, cracked molds, and one cheese knife bent into the shape of a question mark. These served well, Brother Aurelian says, running his hand along the wall. And now they rest. After lunch, you visit the painting desk. No, not art labels. Some cheeses are branded or stamped. Others are simply painted with natural dyes made from ash, beetroot, or walnut. These marks told you everything: date of birth, milk used, flavor expected, feast it belongs to. You're handed a tiny brush and a pot of ink made from boiled nettles. Your task to draw a small star on the side of a soft wheel meant for Easter. Your hand trembles slightly. The star looks more like a sleepy asterisk, but no one says anything. Before evening prayers, you help lift one of the oldest wheels from the bottom shelf of the cellar. It's nearly 5 years old, cracked, dark, and smelling like a forest after rain. It was made, you're told, with tools that no longer exist, using a technique no longer practiced. No one remembers why it was stored. No one dares cut it. It's just there, a cheese relic. You sit beside it for a while, letting the cool cellar air soak into your robe. The candle flickers nearby. You rest your hand gently on the rind. It's solid, heavy, patient, and it makes you wonder not just how long this cheese has been waiting, but what else has been passed down through the years, pressed into the silence between chores, between chants, between curd and cloth and brine. The tools may change, the monks may come and go, but the cheese and the care that makes it continues. You return to your cell, the scent of herbs and salt still on your fingers. Outside, the sky has turned to gold, and somewhere in the quiet dark, a wheel of cheese settles into its shape, held together by time, tradition, and a paddle carved like a leaf. The storm returns in the night, this time with thunder, not loud, crashing fury, but long, rumbling sighs that roll across the sky like a cow waking up too early. You sit up in your cot and listen. The rain hisses along the window pane, slow and steady, soaking the garden below. By morning, the courtyard is a shallow lake, puddles blooming like lazy lilies. The monks are already about, their robes lifted slightly to avoid wet hems, sandals slapping against stone. You follow the scent of warm milk and peat smoke to the dairy wing, though the pace today is slower. the mood more reflective. Because today, Brother Aurelian says, we remember, the decline of cheese in the cloister wasn't sudden. It was a slow fade, like a wheel aging too long, until it cracks and caves inward. The golden era of monastic cheese gave way to changes that no prayer or paddle could stop. You gather with the others near the fireplace, steaming mugs in hand, as Brother Gerwin begins the tale. It starts, like so many declines, with politics. In the 16th century, monastic lands across Europe were seized. Kings grew jealous of the monks' wealth, much of it made from cheese and ale, and their near monopoly on silence. The English Reformation saw entire abbeys dissolved, monks scattered, libraries burned, cheese presses broken or repurposed into cider jacks. Dozens of cheese-making traditions were lost in those years. Recipes forgotten, cellars emptied. The quiet art of coaxing curd into holiness. Interrupted, one monastery in the south wrote a final inventory before closing its doors. The last entry, one wheel, soft rind, tasted at dusk, shared among all. Enough. You sit with that for a moment. The simplicity, the sorrow, even in places where monasteries survived, the world had changed. New foods, faster commerce. Cheese became industrial, uniform, efficient. No more handwritten labels. No more wheels that hum during thunderstorms. Brother Thomas sighs. People wanted predictability. We made cheese that tasted like time. That wasn't enough anymore. Still, some abbeys held on. Quietly, in corners of Europe. The old methods persisted, passed down not through books, but hands. You see it in Brother Aurelian's grip on the paddle, the way Brother Gerwin smells the curd, not to test it, but to greet it. You're shown an old photograph later that day, black and white, edges curled with age. A row of monks standing beside a table of cheese wheels. Their faces are serious, proud, tired. You recognize the same expressions in the monks today. There's also humor in the loss. Oddly enough, one monk chuckles as he tells the story of a wheel that aged through a war, forgotten in a barrel marked grain. When it was rediscovered 20 years later, it had fossilized. We keep it as a paperweight now, he says, placing it on the desk beside a stack of salters. But not everything was mourned. Some changes were welcomed, new ingredients, better tools, cheesemaking for the joy of it, not just the survival. And says son, eventually, the revival began. In the 20th century, a few abbeys reclaimed their cheese-making traditions. A wheel here, a batch there. Old recipes reconstructed from journals, oral tales, and the stubborn memories of retired brothers who'd never forget the right way to stir. You're handed one of those resurrected wheels to wrap today. It's pale, slightly firm, with a delicate rind that smells of almonds and dust. The monks call it the return. It's only made once a year. You wrap it carefully, like a gift, Dinner is quiet tonight, just barley soup, hard bread, and slivers of 3 cheeses each from a different century. The old one is crumbly and sharp, the middle one soft and nutty, the newest bright and a little tangy. You taste them in order and feel the passage of time settle in your mouth like a prayer. Afterward, you walk through the cellar alone, lantern in hand. The wheels sleep soundly. Some will be eaten soon. Others will wait years. A few may never be touched again. You pause by a shelf marked simply in memoriam. The cheeses here are cracked, misshapen, unfinished, made in times of trouble when war came, when flood struck, when famine tightened its grip. They were never sold, never served, just kept. Witnesses, in their way. You touch one gently, its rind is rough. It smells faintly of smoke and lavender. It was made in silence, and it will rest in silence. As you leave the cellar, the rain begins again, drumming softly overhead. The monks file past you, robes swishing, voices low. They carry no cheese tonight, only memory. You return to your bed, heavier with thought than with food, and let the sound of the storm lull you into a long, deep sleep. And somewhere below, the cheeses breathe. And remember, the rain doesn't fall this morning, it mists. A soft, ghost-like veil that clings to your skin and settles on your eyelashes like sleep you haven't shaken off. The world feels muffled, as though the monastery itself has wrapped you gently in a linen cloth. Just like one of its precious aging wheels, there's a stillness in the air, but not of nothingness. It's a full, dense kind of quiet. The kind that comes when something is ending, or perhaps completing itself. Brother Aurelian finds you standing near the garden, watching the rosemary beads glisten under the fog. He doesn't say anything at first, just stands beside you, arms folded under his sleeves. You've lasted longer than most, he says finally. Most guests get bored by day 4, or they try to escape when they hear about the quiet room with the cheese that might be haunted. You smile. I'm still here. He nods. Then it's time. He leads you not to the dairy, not to the cellar, but to a small room tucked behind the chapel. You didn't know it was there. No one ever mentioned it. Inside, there's a round wooden table, a single stool, and a cheese wheel sitting on a carved slate slab. It's modest, softly golden, a whisper of mold on the edges, as if time touched it kindly. This, he says, is the listening cheese. You sit. This cheese, made once a year, never eaten. It's created by hand, stirred in silence, blessed with every prayer of the day. Then it rests here, alone, not to age, but to witness. Over the next hour, you're left with it. You don't speak. You barely move. You just sit in the chair and listen to the hum of your own breath, to the far-off shuffle of sandals in the cloister, to the memory of bells ringing in the rain, to the stillness that fills the monastery like a slow breath. No one expects you to feel anything, but you do. A softness, a settling, like a wheel that's been turned just one last time and so simply rests. Brother Aurelian returns without a word and takes the cheese, wrapping it gently in fresh cloth. We'll store it, he says. Someday, someone else will sit here. You nod. It feels like the end of something. And yet, nothing really ends here. It just gets stirred, aged, remembered. Before you leave, the monks invite you to share one final meal. It's a celebration, though they'd never call it that. You sit in the refectory under flickering candlelight. There's fresh bread, lentil stew, and a cheese you helped make 3 weeks ago, the one with violet petals and wild garlic. It's perfect, soft, mellow. It tastes of rain and time and quiet mornings. Halfway through the meal, Brother Gerwin lifts his goblet just water, of course, and says, "To good milk and good company." Even Brother Thomas smiles and raises a crust of bread. As night deepens, you return one last time to the cellar. You pause in front of your favorite wheel, the one you turned on your third day here. It sits contentedly, its linen wrap a little looser now, its scent richer. It has changed. It is becoming. You touch the shelf beside it and whisper, "Good night." Then, slowly, you walk back through the cloister, past the chapel, the herb garden, the little door that hides the tools worn smooth by centuries of care. You lie down on your cot, the wool blanket heavy, your mind full of curd and rain and monks who sing to mold. And if you're still with me now, hey everyone, we've reached the end of our sleepy story. Have you finally drifted off? If you're still awake somehow, leave a comment and let me know how far you made it. Maybe even share your favorite cheese, or just say goodnight from your corner of the world. But if you're already dreaming, I hope it's peaceful. I hope you're walking through that quiet monastery, trailing your fingers along cool stone, tasting the scent of thyme and wood smoke and rain-washed rind. And just before we fully close the doors on this dreamy world, here's a little wind down. Let everything begin to soften now. Let your breathing slow. Your hands go still. The sounds of the monastery fade gently into the background. The rustle of a robe, the soft ring of distant bells, the quiet exhale of cows in their stalls, and the low hum of candlelight flickering in its brass holder. Outside, the rain continues, but it's a lullaby now, tapping gently against the shutters, trickling along the roof, pooling in the corners of the cloister where water gathers with the same quiet devotion as the monks who live within. Imagine walking once more through the cool cellar, your fingertips brushing the linen-wrapped rounds, stacked like sleeping giants. The air is cool on your skin, damp with patience, thick with 1,000 quiet stories. Up above, the halls are still. Somewhere, a hymn echoes from a memory you didn't know you carried. And within you, A calm settles low and steady, like cheese coming to rest on a clean wooden shelf. You are safe here. You are still here, and nothing is expected of you now. Not effort, not answers, just sleep. Let your eyes soften. Let your thoughts drift like parchment on warm wind. Let the warmth of that final bite of cheese linger in your chest, faintly herbal, faintly sweet, the taste of care, of time, of peace, and let yourself drift, where the wheels turn slowly, where silence is full, not empty, where the rain and the rind meet in the dark. Sleep well